Up next, we have a really special treat. Our friend Peter is here, and he's a really influential person in this space, and I implore you guys to really listen. He is the CEO of a Denver-based tech services company known as Greystone Technology, 6-time Inc. 5000 honoree, and 8-time top workplace winner. Greystone attributes 20 consecutive years to growth to its innovation and straightforward approach to people. The unique strategy has been especially critical in the past 3 years, where Greystone significantly outpaced the industry in employee retention. That's hard these days. And attraction during the Great Resignation. Peter has been named one of Colorado's top 25 CEOs, 40 under 40 Titan 100, Channel Pro 2020 Visionary. Peter speaks globally on topics related to establishing culture at scale, hiring, disrupting service industries, and rapid growth. Please join with me and welcome our friend Peter Melby.
Thank you. Couple things. Number one, I don't know who's in charge of scheduling that put the IT guy right after lunch when everybody's tired, but I'll try to keep you awake, try to entertain you, but also try to give you some meaningful tidbits you can take back to your jobs, your day-to-day. Full transparency, I don't know anything about printing t-shirts. I am moderately adequate at wearing t-shirts. And I do know, I'm aware of Bella Canvas. My favorite Hard Times satire article is this one. My world is IT services, and you might be wondering what an IT guy is doing here. And it's interesting because while we do very different things, there are some similarities in our industries and in business in general. And a lot of it is that it's easy when you start a business that centers around a technical skill or a craft to jump in and start using that technical skill or that craft. But as you scale and expand a business, you have to know a lot more than that craft. And that's my journey too. And one of my favorite things about environments like this and just business in general is sharing stories and sharing the stories of successes and failures, challenges, and that's what I'm going to do for a little bit today. If I look at my journey, today, Greystone Technology, we're about a $25 million services firm, 120 employees based in Denver. And like your space, the IT services space is very fragmented. 25 million, 120 employees, by technical definitions, is still a small business. But in the IT space, it's massive. Top 50 in the world in terms of where our focus is. And there's a reason why companies in our space stay small. So oftentimes when I talk about this and talk about the journey, start at the beginning. And I'll be honest, I'm very, very fortunate. I came from a family that really valued always learning, valued education. My mom's a preschool teacher. My dad's a college professor, so I got both ends of the spectrum. My dad and I bragged that between the two of us, we have 4 college degrees. He has 4 of them. And I quit school to do this. And especially in the tech space, people really love to glorify the college dropout, visionary, all this. That was not this. I was much more lazy college student, not wanting to go to class. And I made a decision. And sometimes in business, we make decisions good. Sometimes in business, we make good decisions. But a lot of business is about making decisions good after the fact. And that's what this was. I woke up one day and said, oh no, I have to make this something. And so I did what most, I looked around and said, all right, who do I want to emulate? And where are they? How can I go learn from them? How can I talk to them? So I started going to industry conferences. It's a lot like this, less fashionable, way less cool. But I would go to these conferences and I would watch the companies that I wanted. I wanted to be their size. I wanted to be on their path. And I go to all the sessions, and in the IT space, it was really focused on what are the up and coming technology trends. and it was all about, new innovation. The theme of the conference was, splashy and new and exciting. And then after the sessions were over, the real conference started at the hotel bar, usually after like the third drink, when everybody started talking about the real stuff and the real challenges in their business. And it wasn't about technology at all. Year after year after year, it was about people. And it was about the challenges of how do we engage people, in these spaces. And there were two words. I remember someone telling to me, and they just stuck out. And they've rattled around in my head over 20 years of doing this, and probably in yours too. It's like, I wish that people would just think. Common sense. And so I remember, a few years into the business, I looked at this and said, you know what? I care about people. And if we can be a good place to work, this can be pretty simple. And so we started down that journey, and it worked. We built a great reputation, really close, tight-knit team. And was so proud of it. So 10 years ago, 10th anniversary, we had a great year, and we decided to take everybody out for a really fun night. So employees, significant others, I think we had 10 employees at the time, pulling out all the stops, for a company of our size. And I'm going home to get my wife to pick her up and go to dinner. And I get this email from someone in my company about another team member of ours. And I like candor, not necessarily like this. And so I was frustrated. I was frustrated that on the night of our 10th anniversary, we're supposed to be celebrating, I've got to deal with people problems. And it was rare, but I couldn't figure out what was going on in this email. It took me about 30 seconds of processing to realize that this email wasn't supposed to be sent to me. It was supposed to be sent to somebody else in the company about me. So dinner was fun. But that was the day that I realized that my reach in the organization, my good intentions, my caring about people, having all the best ideas didn't create the culture that I wanted when it came to the reality. What I saw was good, but I didn't see what was really going on. And so my strategy fell apart. And I did what a lot of people do when they start to lose that connection to people, or they get burned by somebody, or they look at what it really takes to scale a business. And I stopped trusting people. And I joined the Babysitters Club. A lot of us are there. I think most of us end up there at some point. If you haven't, buckle up, because you will. But it's just brutal. If you look at it, this is a picture of what I looked like then. Haven't aged especially well since then. But the problem with the Babysitters Club is that the more you have to babysit your team, the more babysitting they need. The less you trust people, the less trustworthy they become. And you create this culture of, I can't do anything on my own. And then you wonder why people can't do anything on their own. And it's just a vicious circle. And it's funny, there's a study that was done by Business Insider about Silicon Valley companies a few years back. And the study centered on Uber at the time that they were really struggling culturally. And it centered on their dismal employee retention. So can anyone guess what the average employee tenure was at Uber at that point? It was 1.23 years, 15 months, let's say. So, what'd you say? And great point. Thanks for that. Vesting it 1 year and then So call centers are 0.8. It's not that far off. Google's been, since I've been doing a lot of this over the past couple decades, Google has that reputation of being culturally focused, things like that. Can anyone guess what Google's annual employee tenure is? It's 1.9 years. If you look at it, Facebook at the time, they're not there anymore, had the best at just over 2. We're not magnitudes of order off from the worst to the best when it comes to culture and people. And the reality is, people are hard. There's nothing about this session today that is going to change that fact. There's no shortcut, there's no magic wand, you all know that. But as we build our organizations, whether it's with 2 people or 200 people, there are some really, really key learnings that can help us get a competitive advantage, help us sleep better, help us find more of what we want, in our business lives. And there's this quote by Steve Jobs it's on LinkedIn a lot. It doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. Hey, we hire smart people so they can tell us what to do. And Steve Jobs fans, I think he's full of shit. Smart people don't do what we need them to do just because they're smart. In fact, oftentimes it's the smartest people on our teams that we have the hardest time to corral in the right direction. And so we're often in this place where we're chasing people and we're not trusting them. And we're trying to micromanage where they go, or we're not micromanaging and we're not happy about the result. So I promise I didn't tell you, they didn't bring me here just to say, hey, your life is hard, have fun. But there are some things that we can engage in. And our breakthrough came in one very specific realization. And as we looked at all the cultures that we wanted to emulate, that we didn't want to emulate, where all the struggles were, we recognized that on a long enough timeline, every company culture succumbs to the laws of human nature. We are cultures of people. And we cannot manufacture a culture with foosball and beer in the fridge and unlimited PTO. If the best thing about your company is that people can spend unlimited time away from your company, that's not a great sign. Those things are great. We have those at Greystone, but that's not our culture. Our culture is how we engage and interact with each other as humans. And I say that, and people get super bummed because they tend to look at, as you grow your company, this idea that what the company wants, what the employees want, are completely separate. And if I ask people about human nature of team members and employees and partners, especially if they're in the Babysitters Club, this is the kind of stuff that they share. There's a lack of trust. There's posturing, sharing the information that's going to get me where I need to go. A lot of selfishness, gossip. The toxicity in our organizations comes from this idea of who people are and how people interact together. But what we learned, and we can spend a couple hours on this, specific thing, but what we learned is that this is the crust of human nature. It is true about people, but if we look at people in a deeper sense, then we find something pretty different. I love, Myers-Briggs and Colby and DISC and all the things that tell us how people are unique and different and apart. And helping us to engage people better where they're at. But there are some things that unify everybody, all of our team members. And it's things like, I want to succeed. They're basics. I want to improve. I want to be better at what I do tomorrow. I want to feel more confident. I want to be enough. I want to make more money. Everyone does. And people do like taking risks and taking chances, but they want to make sure that they're safe and that they're going to be okay. What's interesting is that all these are true about my company too. And so what we've learned is that this can actually be a myth when we start to engage in some of those deeper practices. And for those of you who, this session is not going to be about how to turn your organization into a counseling center, where you talk through everybody's deepest, darkest challenges and all of that. That's not what business is for. But if we can engage in this differently, we can change our cultures, and we can change our cultures in a way that sets a foundation to grow, and scale in ways that don't put everything on the leader all the time. What we learned is that the closer the alignment between the company culture and how humans really, really are, the deeper we have to be connected. And most people don't know to focus on this. Most organizations sit in this place of good intentions. They know people are important. Some companies don't even care. Some, frankly, don't have to. People are not as critical to what they do. But culture starts to change when you become intentional about connecting what you do into how people truly are and how people truly act. And it becomes transformative when you do it repeatedly and you create a practice. The ticket out of the Babysitters Club is an understanding, of the depth of human nature and what connects people together and aligning company activities and engagement around that. That's a hard thing to do. There are 3 problems that I'm going to talk about today that we encountered along the way after we had this realization. Then I'm going to share some processes that we built that are very basic that have helped us through some of these things. To highlight the problems, does anybody remember this story? A few years back, a passenger was beaten and bloodied and drug off of a United plane. I fly United from Denver. I always edit my slides and do a walkthrough on the flight. So last night as I was flying in, I was doing this, I got a couple of odd looks when I had the slide up from the flight attendants. If you look at this story, this happened because everybody at United did everything right. And in fact, the next day, the CEO sent out an internal memo that unfortunately got leaked, basically commending them for doing the right thing. And if you unpack the story, this is what happened. There was a crew that needed to get from point A to point B. I think it was from somewhere to Kentucky. And there's a process for that. There's a flight, there's no seats available, there's a process for that. The process says incentivize some people to get off the plane. No one took the bait, in terms of the credit. There's a process for that. Say, increase that compensation. No one still got off the plane. There's a process for that. We ran it. We maxed out our capability of offering compensation. There's a process for that, and we are going to have to remove people from the plane and disqualify their tickets. And at the end of that process chain, the process, if someone doesn't get off the plane, call security. Airport security drug him off the plane. There's a security guard in that video, not a United employee. That security guard lost his job after a year of paid leave. United lost $1 billion in shareholder value in a day. Because processes are great, but perfect processes do not account for imperfect situations. And nowhere along the line was someone allowed to just think. Now, United learned from that. They started giving their staff more autonomy to make decisions, more flexibility around how they can impact their flyers' journeys, more ability to increase compensation. And it's been largely better. But when we give people autonomy, it doesn't always work the way that we want. Which brings us to problem number 1, which is the best employees we have, the best team members we have, the best people we work with are self-driven and autonomous. But most employees don't naturally do what we need them to do. And so there's this conflict when it comes to trust and autonomy and freedom and all the things that we want with our team members. But I want you to, one of the things I learned, and it took me a while, can really be summed up in this video. Hopefully you can see it from the back. Just watch this for about 15 seconds and get real uncomfortable. You couldn't pay any of us to do this. Actually, in this room, that might not be true. I usually say that. There might be someone here who's like, yeah, actually, for all I know, that guy is sitting in the back somewhere. But for the rest of us, this is insanity. This is a ride on the Las Vegas Strip that's called Insanity, where tens of thousands of people every year pay $30 to go feel the thrill of being hung out over the Las Vegas Strip, to feel the danger knowing that they are 100% safe. And this is the realization that we had around autonomy, is that it's actually clear direction that can enable autonomy with our team members, which is wonderful news, because I don't have to just look at autonomy as letting people do whatever they want or whatever they think is best. Autonomy is where accountability meets freedom and purpose, an understanding of where we're going, an understanding of what accountability means, and the ability to make decisions in that space. And in my company, we go a step further. It's a bit redundant, but we call it directed autonomy because we emphasize the clear direction. And someone who's worked for us, their first job, and they've been with us for 10 days, has less autonomy than someone who's been here for 10 years and who demonstrated the understanding of these things. But everybody gets space to make decisions. Everybody gets space to look at it and say, all right, I think this is the way that things should be. I know where I'm going, and I have the ability to do this effectively. And directed autonomy, has become just a cornerstone for how we engage our team members. And honestly, it works for everyone in the company except me. Because if I'm going to trade my command and control tendencies, my practice of telling people what to do and then telling them how they're doing, I have to make sure that the most important information in my company is accurate as it's coming up to me. Which brings us to problem number 2, that we need to trust our employees. We know that there's no other way for us to get out of the Babysitters Club, get out of the micromanagement piece. But they lie a lot, especially at work. And honestly, if we dig into it, I don't know that we can really fault them for that. I mean, honestly, most of the employment process is based on lies. The resume, the job description, both sides of the interview table. It's all about saying what's going to get us to where we think we need to go. There's not a lot of authenticity that begins an employment relationship. You hire a rock star, and then you figure out that, oh, no, they're a real person. They got problems. Someone, gets their dream job. They, oh, wait, no, they're real people. There's problems there too. It's the reality of it. But when we have these expectations and we have this engagement, it's inauthentic. We don't share the real information. I can't steer my company because I don't know if what I'm getting is real or not. And the idea of autonomy goes out the window. And so there's a term that's gotten actually a lot more press in the last 3 to 4 years called psychological safety, which is the ability to really share what's going on in your organization. And again, it's one of those very touchy-feely things that some leaders shy away from. But if we look at it, it's actually just connecting authentically. There's a big difference between authenticity and transparency. Transparency is sharing everything all the time. Authenticity is making sure that what you do share is correct and true. Our companies are not places for every bit of information. Every culture is different. Every leadership style is different. But authenticity can be pursued in those spaces. Psychological safety is never something that you achieve. It's not something you can create. It's something that you can allow for, that you can build foundations for. And honestly, transformation starts the moment that you start to consider what psychological safety can look like in your organizations and build practices that support that. So I gave this talk in Vegas 5 or 6 years ago, and travel a fair amount. I was really trying to be healthy, and I promised myself that every trip that year I was gonna work out every day that I was gone. So I flew in early on a Sunday. I was speaking on Monday, and decided to go for a run on the Las Vegas Strip, which if you've ever done or seen anyone do, it's a terrible idea. Because there's no straight lines anywhere, up escalators, across bridges, around people trying to sell drugs. It's not a conducive place for exercise. And so I'm just about to give up. And I look over and there's a road rage incident that's starting to develop. And so I start paying attention. There's a small SUV behind a large SUV at a stoplight. The stoplight's green. The large SUV in front is not moving. The small SUV would very much like to move, and laying on the horn. Rolls down his window, yells some choice things, and the car still doesn't move. And by that point, there's a small crowd of us gathering to see what fireworks are about to happen next. We assume that he's going to open his door, but he doesn't. He opened his sunroof. And he took a full, I think it was probably an iced coffee, and he pitched it out the sunroof of his car. And it was a perfect shot. Hit the top of the car in front of him, hit the windshield, opened up all down the front of the car, and all over the man in the wheelchair in front of the car who couldn't get over the curb that no one could see. We don't have a lot of moments in our lives where we see someone's perspective or instant change in a moment. Most of that happens over time. But I got to see his face when he realized what happened. None of us could see that. But one of the things that struck me is that I realized that there is nothing that anyone could have said to him to help him learn the lesson of what he did any better than he did. I saw his face. But if someone accosted him and came and said, "What are you doing?" What's his natural reaction going to be? Defensiveness, justification. I didn't know, I couldn't see him, stuff, but he knows. That's a behavior changing moment in that. One of the most critical parts of cultivating psychological safety is understanding that self-reflection is one of our best friends when it comes to our team members. When we really engage in understanding what our team members think of themselves, it unlocks something very, very unique and very different. Because if I walk into someone's office and say, "You're not very good at X," and there's a wall and defensiveness, it's very different than if I were to get an honest answer to the question, "What do you wish you were better at?" So, well, that thing. Most people are very self-aware when it comes to these things. And oftentimes they're their biggest self-critics. So tapping into that is something that we can really understand and engage in. And it's funny, there's a lot of generational, theories about the workforce. And I don't believe all of them. I do think that we are in a different employment time right now. Whether it's generational, whether it's technology and social media driven. I do believe we have the most externally self-confident, but internally self-conscious workforce that we've ever had. And if you're like me and you see someone who's posturing and projecting and acting entitled and all of these things, and they're positioning themselves up here, and I look at it and say, "Well, that's not going to fly. You're not. That's not you. I need to bring you back down to reality." Well, they're down here, and so I'm pushing them further and further down while they're projecting more and more as a defense mechanism. And when we cultivate that self-reflection and understand how they feel about each other, we can get through some of that. Some people love this concept because they're not the confrontational type. Some people really don't love this concept because they like to be very, very direct about what happens. So good news, bad news. The second part of cultivating psychological safety is to criticize directly. And it might seem counterintuitive in that space, but once you understand what they think of themselves, they need to clearly understand what you think of them. Otherwise, they're making it up in their heads. They're wondering. They're going home and saying, I don't know if I'm cutting it. And if they're not cutting it, we're afraid to tell them because we don't want them to feel bad, but we're still suffering the fact that they're not cutting it, they don't know, and there's a bunch of confusion around it. People criticize themselves, in their leader's voice in their head, and most of the time it's wrong. So when you're being very direct, it's actually a wonderful way to earn that human respect. We have to be compassionate, empathetic, but we have to be real, and we don't need to be apologetic about it. We just need to be consistent. So psychological safety is a worthy endeavor that helps support these ideas of what a human nature-based culture can be. And problem number 3 is that people want to do exciting, meaningful work, get really jazzed about the things that really inspire them. But they can't get the basics right. And in my world, we sell time. We're an IT company, but really we're selling people's time to people, who have IT needs. And so my favorite thing to talk about in my company is obviously employee time cards. And it's that thing where it's just the worst. Reminders. It's the smartest people I know, I got, had to chase them down because we got to figure out how to get paid for your time so we can pay you. It's a simple concept, but people skip past it. So I had a manager one time that I fired because we just could not get over some of the basics like time cards. He didn't want to do one. And he didn't think his team should need to do them either. And it's just a non-starter. I said, I don't know what to do. Tired of arguing about it. We made a change, and it was a change for the better, probably for both of us. And in Denver, I actually live an hour north of Denver. And so I take a commuter bus whenever I can, especially on Fridays because traffic is terrible and Wi-Fi works by 20% of the time on the bus and I can get some stuff done going home. And the bus has never been full except one time. And it happened to be a day that I really needed to get home on time. And so they came out to the people waiting in line and said, it's going to be full. We're going to count off. There's 51 seats on the bus. So I'm just like, please, please, please. And they count 49, 50. I'm 51. I made it. And I get on the bus and I'm trying to find the one empty seat. And I found it and I look up and it's right next to the manager that I'd fired about 6 months before. I genuinely like the guy, still do. Maybe not enough to sit like legs touching for an hour and 15 minutes. But we made small talk. How's the new job? He was commuting to Denver, but he was enjoying it. And then he said, you know what? I need to get some work done. If you don't mind. I said, yeah, that's fine. I got to get some stuff done too. I said, what are you doing? What kind of work do you have on a Friday afternoon going home? So, well, I have to do my daily time card. And I tried to suppress a laugh and I failed. And I said, what? And he shrugged it off. He said, it's not a big deal. He said, it's really important to them. It's like, we yelled at each other about this and I fired you. How did you not understand that this was important in our organization? And he said something to me that changed my entire trajectory of how I looked at basic tasks in my company. And he said, I showed up on day one and they just told me, hey, here are the rules. And I realized that I had worked so hard to build this culture where everybody had a voice and everybody, had, we could get information going all the ways we wanted to, but there were some things I didn't really care about people's feedback around. And time cards was one of them. It's not a disrespect thing. It was actually disrespectful to allow people to have feedback that I wasn't going to process or be interested in. We learned that these battles are only won before we fight them. And they're won with the idea of expectations. And we started what changed our organization. We call it citizenship. Citizenship is a list of agreements. Core values are fine, but they can be interpreted different ways. Agreements are specific actions that we agree on as an organization. No compromises, clearly explained. People are adults. We explain why we have the rules that we do, and we absolutely source feedback from key places in terms of what was most critical in that space. But we involve it now not just in the employee onboarding process, but actually in the hiring process. Our citizenship statement is something that we use in every second interview. And you know what? People love it because they love knowing what they're coming into. They love an understanding of what success looks like. And they're never more ready to say yes. And that yes doesn't change when they start. So our citizenship and our company has things like time cards, on time, every time, 0 reminders. It's a cultural lift. It is not something that a manager says you need to do this. Our dress code is use your attire to support your professional success. Our dress code used to be for guys, it was slacks and a button-up shirt. If you want to know who can make that look really bad, it's your average IT guy. And so we realized that putting those purpose-focused guidelines in place treated people like adults, but it made it clear where we needed to go. When you have a problem, talk to someone who can do something about it before you talk to someone who can't. We're not going to shut down workplace relationship, workplace gossips. We don't want to. People are going to complain. But if they understand that if they're going to complain that we need to go to someone who can take action, it's culture changing. And break rules, don't ignore them. The difference between ignoring a rule and breaking a rule, you got to have a rule in the first place. And you have to communicate that you're breaking it and why. So people want autonomy, but they're not accountable. We want to trust our employees, but they lie. People fail at minor responsibilities. Directed autonomy, psychological safety, and citizenship are the 3 themes that we uncovered in creating a human nature-based culture. And they're great ideas. And if you're like me, you get excited about ideas and you kind of grapple with it, and then next time you revisit it, you think, oh yeah, there's a really good idea, I got to do something with that. But they stay ideas. So this didn't change our organization until we started to understand the process. So I'm going to roll through our process, and I'm going to do it really fast. Don't worry about taking pictures of slides, about taking notes. Focus, if we're connected here, there's a QR code and the link at the end. I will send you the deck. I will send you all of our materials that we've built around this, in some simple processes for you to, use, steal, modify, whatever you want. But it starts with the fact that we have to create clear direction in our organization. And this is probably one of the hardest parts. Citizenship document, citizenship statement. Bring your key stakeholders together and find those agreements and make sure that everybody, including you and including everybody, whether you're a team of 2 or whether you're a team of 200, it still matters. Create a purpose statement for every role you have in your organization. And here's the key is, why am I paying you to be here? It's that crass. Because that's the directness. And it helps people understand what their overall purpose is. And then we work to create no more than 5 areas of focus for every job. They can, if it's a fast-moving, fast-changing job, those can be, quick changes. If you use something like Gazelles or EOS, something like that, it can align with some of that, the rocks concepts and things like that as well. but we define it, we write it down. And we have a process that we call Ringer. It's 2 monthly meetings, employee engagement, team engagement, and performance management all wrapped in together. So the monthly meeting 1 is a team meeting. And it's a manager and the manager's direct reports. So for some of you, that's your whole company. As we grew, it became, I have my ring, each of them has theirs, each of their people has theirs, and it goes out from there. The meeting rules are you can only bring a piece of paper and a pen, or if it's digital, and remote now, you're committed to only looking at the piece of paper that you bring, and it's a very specific piece of paper. It's what we call a story sheet, and I'll get into that. The rules are share authentically, listen actively, and don't interrupt. And this is the story sheet. So you've got your 5 areas of focus. You don't need to worry about the reading actually what's on them. And you rate them. So self-rating, I'm running, I'm walking, I'm stuck, or I'm lost. We're measuring gut feelings here. And then each team member is answering questions on their sheet. What am I proud of that I've done this month? What could I have done better? Light self-reflection. It's still in a group setting. People aren't entirely authentic about it, but over time it gets more that way. What am I stressed out and or excited about? Sometimes they're different, sometimes they're the same things. And what roadblocks are in my way in my role? And then, how busy am I? Just a quick self-reflection, self-assessment. And we go around the table, and when people prepare this, it takes typically 10 minutes to prepare it, maybe 15 if you really invest in it. And it's between 3 and 4 minutes to report that out to the group. So for my group of 6, once a month in 24 minutes, I know where they stand in the basics, and they know that about each other. So we're creating this environment where people are used to sharing these things. The second meeting is the one-on-one. Monthly one-on-one. Some people do one-on-ones weekly. Some people don't do them at all. Some people do them when there's a problem. I used to start one-on-ones in the worst possible way you can start a one-on-one, which is, how's it going? Because if you take 30 minutes for a one-on-one, you'll spend 28 minutes dancing around how it's going, which has nothing to do with anything real. And at the end, you either chicken out of saying what needs to be said, or you try to squeeze it into 2 minutes. Structured, repeated questions. And so we have this story sheet, that we built, where the left side is the information from the employee. And the first thing that they answer is, how satisfied and engaged are you in your job? Red, yellow, green. Again, we're just measuring gut feelings. But it's great to calibrate where our team members are. And it's an easy question to answer. And then they answer 4 questions. What are you succeeding at? What are you working to improve? This is where we get deeper self-reflection. What do you want to be better at? What roadblocks are in your way, and how can I support you better as a leader? So it goes both ways. There's an opportunity to share, the challenge. And when you write it down, something magic happens. It's easier to be vulnerable. I had one of my team members walk in one time, and he wouldn't even read what he wrote to the question, how can I support you better as a leader? Because he was so nervous to say it that he just pointed at it. It was something I needed to hear. It was something I was unaware of. It didn't end up being a big deal, but he felt like it was going to be. And he never would have said it if there wasn't a consistency in asking that question. Self-reflection in a structured way. On the other side, it's the leader's turn. We fill these out and we show them to each other, in real time. And it's the employee asking the questions that need to be asked. What were my standout actions? So as a leader, we're not forgetting to point out the things that we see that are positive without doing that kind of BS like compliment sandwich thing, where like compliment you, criticize you, and compliment you, but really the only thing that matters is the criticism. Where have you seen growth? Talk about that journey openly. What do I need to adjust as an employee? Every person in my company, every month, is told something that they need to change. It's culture, and people like it. They don't like it at first. It's a little unnerving. But they just got to share what they need to be different as well. And the last question is the one that I resisted for the longest time. I didn't like it. I still struggle with it. But every employee once a month every leader answers this question about every employee once a month. Am I meeting expectations in my role? And the reason why I resisted it is because I didn't want to answer it. Because it didn't have the right answer in a lot of places. And I felt like it would be really painful in my company to answer that directly for everybody. And you know what? It was. But there's a big difference between 10 employees and 120. And it starts when we have a lot of that real engagement. And so this isn't about the specific process we built. It's about consistently getting the right information going in the right spaces in the organization. And it takes some time. The employee time is typically 2 hours. The manager, 6 hours a month. But we actually find it saves time. One-off conversations, one-on-ones it replaces other team meetings and confusion. So I'm gonna wrap this up, and there's some information here. Connect with me on LinkedIn, connect with me. If you have questions, we won't have time for a big Q&A here, but I love talking about this stuff, obviously. There'll be a QR code at the end to get all of the materials. So please do that. Send me your info. We will continue this conversation, as we go. But the most critical thing for our organization is that it transformed our organization so we could focus on what really mattered, and that was the customer. The employees and the customers are the lifeblood of our organization. And when we have the connection with the employees, then we can teach them how to engage differently with the customers. And we have 10 service rules that are really the focus of what we do. And this has allowed us to get out of our own way and implement these. And just to highlight two, the first one is pan out and pull focus. It's a film term, obviously, but it's in a situation, pan out and understand what's really going on. Good IT people can solve problems. Great IT people really explore what problem they're solving. And that's been transformative in our business. It's probably true in a lot of other industries as well. But the most popular service rule we have is JFT, which stands for just think. So, thank you.
Thank you, Peter, so much. It was fantastic.